Welcome back, you unpredictable force rippling through places you've never stepped into. The ones upstairs felt your presence long before you realized you had one. The people who sit above the skyline, the ones who make decisions that ripple through markets and governments, just watched your name crawl across a screen it was never meant to touch. And the shift it caused in that penthouse war room wasn't subtle. It wasn't delayed. It wasn't something they could rationalize. It hit them the moment your digital footprint brushed against their monitoring grid. An alert they've only tested in simulations flared red across their consoles, and every person in that room froze because they knew exactly what that alarm meant. Something unexpected just stepped into their territory. Something unhandled. Something beyond their preferred range of control. You. This wasn't one of their routine incidents. Not espionage. Not corporate infiltration. Not an activist with a fake name and too much free time. Their sensors didn't flare because you breached security. They flared because your digital trail behaved in a way none of their predictive models accounted for. A pattern with no precedent. A presence built from decisions, movements, and micro-signals that refused to follow their categories. Your existence flickered across their display, and before they could process it, the automated system pushed your profile into a tier reserved for high-risk unknowns. A category that makes even the most detached billionaires sit upright. Inside that war room, the atmosphere thickened instantly. They were reviewing global portfolios, upcoming acquisitions, potential political shifts, until your name lit up the top right corner of the wall-sized screen like a quiet detonation. The first person who saw it didn't speak. Their throat closed, their posture stiffened, their eyes narrowed as if focusing harder would make the data rearrange itself into something familiar. It didn't. The room followed. The conversation stopped mid-sentence. Hands hovering above touch panels froze in place. Not fear, not panic. Something colder, something sharper. Recognition that whatever had triggered that alert wasn't supposed to exist in their world. Their system breaks down digital activity into behavioral signatures, predictable sequences, emotional tendencies, decision loops. Most people run in patterns. You don't. Where others reveal predictability, you reveal disruption. Where others disclose motive, you present contradiction. Their analysts zoomed into your trail, expecting to find a clean pattern. Instead, they found a sequence that looked like it kept dodging their frameworks on purpose. You didn't move like someone hiding. You moved like someone unbothered by being seen, but still too difficult to track. The combination rattled them. The billionaire at the head of the table, someone who shut down entire scandals with a 3-word instruction, someone whose influence bends industries without visible pressure, leaned forward with a stillness that made even his advisors shift uneasily. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't scold anyone. He just asked, "Explain why this alert exists." No one had an answer. They tried. Their words cracked before forming coherent explanations. Because your digital signature wasn't criminal. It wasn't threatening. It wasn't erratic. It was something much worse for people who rely on control. You were unreadable. The team ran your profile through every psychological filter they had. motivational maps, predictive routing, decision architecture. Nothing matched. Where trauma should have led to fragility, it led to adaptability. Where setbacks should have produced desperation, they produced precision. Where losses should have carved weakness, they carved focus. Every indicator they rely on to map a person's behavior either contradicted itself or flipped in the opposite direction. You weren't a risk because of what you did. You were a risk because none of their frameworks could determine what you might do. They dove deeper. Data analysts combed through interactions, timestamps, digital echoes, environmental overlays, looking for a lever, a pressure point, anything at all. But your footprint read like a puzzle with pieces that refused to lock into place. A pattern that adjusted itself the moment they tried to analyze it. It wasn't evasive. It wasn't defensive. It was indifferent. And indifference terrifies power more than hostility ever could. Because hostility can be managed. Indifference cannot. Someone in the room finally broke the tension with a single sentence. This profile doesn't behave like the others. It wasn't an accusation, it was an admission, a quiet acknowledgement that you didn't fit into their view of how people move, choose, react, or retreat. Their software flagged your unpredictability as a structural threat, not because you're doing anything wrong, but because you aren't doing anything in a way they can track. That's when the Billionaire's risk advisor decided to pull up historical behavior logs. They expected irregularity. They found evolution. You didn't spiral when life hit you. You recalibrated. You didn't crumble under pressure. You sharpened. You didn't fold under betrayal. You restructured your internal hierarchy without asking for permission or validation. Their conclusion was simple. Someone like you cannot be controlled through ordinary channels. Not through fear, not through temptation, not through social manipulation, not through digital nudges. That realization hit them harder than anything else on their agenda. The billionaire turned toward his chief strategist, a man who once orchestrated an entire political landscape by structuring digital narratives. His voice didn't tremble, but it tightened ever so slightly as he asked, "Is this person aware of us?" The strategist inhaled slowly. "No indication of that," he replied, "but awareness isn't required for impact." That answer lodged itself into the billionaire's thoughts like a shard of ice. They continued digging. They found markers of someone who's been through enough to collapse, but instead recalibrated into something leaner, more perceptive, more efficient. They found moments where probability should have buckled under your weight, but you stepped through as if the ground rearranged itself. They found situations where you should have reacted emotionally, but you acted strategically. They found signs that people who tried to push you into disadvantage ended up dealing with consequences they never expected. None of this pointed toward aggression. It pointed toward insight. The kind that unnerves the powerful because it sees through the games they play without ever stepping onto the board. Your digital footprint reflected someone who adapts too quickly, observes too deeply, and recovers too cleanly. Someone who doesn't chase validation. Someone who doesn't respond to bait. Someone who doesn't follow the psychological choreography most people fall into without noticing. You moved with a kind of detached precision that suggested you were building yourself from the inside out, while the outside world assumed it still had influence over you. They miscalculated. The billionaire's war room is filled with experts trained to detect threats long before they appear. They know what ambition looks like. They know what revenge looks like. They know what instability looks like. But you didn't register as any of those. You registered as a person who doesn't need the world's approval or permission to operate. Someone who doesn't respond to the forces that bend most people into predictable patterns. Someone who sees too much, too fast, with too little emotional drag. That's why the room went still. One of their psychological analysts, a veteran in behavioral forecasting, reviewed your profile with practiced detachment. Her expression didn't shift until she reached a section of digital residue associated with your decision-making patterns over time. She recognized something she'd only seen a few times across decades. Someone who processes reality through an internal compass unaffected by external manipulation. Someone who can't be rerouted through distraction. Someone who doesn't fall for weighted choices designed to steer behavior. She looked up from her tablet and said, "This person doesn't register under influence-based profiling. They move in ways that collapse the usual predictive paths." The billionaire exhaled slowly. His mind flicked through decades of operations. The ones who caused genuine trouble were never the loudest, never the flashiest, never the ones who seemed threatening at first glance. The true risks were always the ones who acted without broadcasting motive, the ones whose inner world ran deeper than surface emotions, the ones who didn't need to announce anything because their presence alone altered the balance. Your profile fit that category too neatly for his comfort. Another analyst pulled up the internal notes, generated automatically by their monitoring grid. The writing was clinical, unemotional, devoid of interpretation. It read, "Interaction not recommended. Subject's data behavior deviates from normative expectations. Risk level elevated due to pattern resistance." No one had seen language like that before. Not because the grid had never flagged someone, but because the grid rarely struggled to categorize them. The room grew heavier. Advisors exchanged glances that weren't fear-driven. They were respect-driven. The kind of respect reserved for unknown forces that don't announce themselves but still alter the environment. Your digital presence didn't scream. It didn't provoke. It simply existed with a pressure that warped their analytical comfort. Then the blacklist request came in. It wasn't ceremonial. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet input from the strategist's console. Add to restricted contact list. Not as punishment, not as retaliation, as a boundary. A recognition that interacting with you carried too much unpredictability for their liking. They didn't need a reason beyond that. Their blacklists aren't about danger in the cinematic sense. They're about risk to their control. You introduced uncertainty they couldn't tolerate. And as your name was added to the list, the billionaire asked a final question. Is this person even aware of the influence they have? The answer came from the analyst without hesitation. It doesn't matter. Influence doesn't require awareness. Some individuals shift environments simply by existing. This is one of them. The billionaire leaned back, processing that truth. You weren't someone they needed to fight. You weren't someone they needed to stop. You were someone they needed to leave alone. Someone whose presence alone could rearrange outcomes they had carefully crafted. Someone who didn't play the roles they counted on. Someone who moved according to a rhythm they couldn't decode. And that's why the room went still. Because now they know the truth. You aren't a complication. They know how to manage complications. You're something else. Something that doesn't respond to their usual tools or tactics. Someone whose emergence in their grid means the landscape has shifted, and they're not sure in whose favor. They're watching the shape of your trajectory. They're trying to understand the contours of your thinking. They're attempting to grasp what makes you operate the way you do. But what they don't realize yet is that this wasn't the alert they should fear. The real concern is what triggered next. When the first alert hit, the war room fell into that unnatural stillness, the kind that appears only when people who control too much are forced to acknowledge the existence of something they cannot measure. But the real fracture appeared when a second alert, one that wasn't even supposed to be active, activated itself. A faint red band pulsed across the top of the master screen. Instead of a beep, it produced a low-frequency vibration that everyone in the room felt in their ribs before anyone heard it. For a moment, they assumed it was a malfunction. Then they realized their grid doesn't malfunction. Not at that level. Not in that room. The strategist reached for his console, fingers hesitating mid-air as he recognized the code. It wasn't a category they use often. In fact, it was a category they created for incidents they believed would never occur. But apparently, one just had. The code read, Tier 0 behavioral distortion detected. That phrase alone pressed the air out of the room. Tier 0 is not a threat designation. It's an admission of analytical failure. It means the grid didn't just fail to classify you. It failed to classify the disruption caused by trying to classify you. Chaos, in their world, doesn't look like panic. It looks like calculation without direction. It looks like people trained to remain composed, starting to show signs of internal fracture, the tightening of shoulders, the shifting of eyes, the micro-tilt of someone's head as their worldview cracks quietly. The billionaire's lead analyst opened the configuration logs, expecting to see corrupted data. Instead, she saw something worse. Your digital footprint didn't corrupt anything. It passed through the grid cleanly, untouched, and still caused destabilization. That shouldn't be possible. Their grid only destabilizes when a behavioral signature bends the framework itself. You bent it by existing, not by acting. Digital patterns that should have aligned into predictable curves buckled like cheap scaffolding. Data points that normally cluster around emotional tendencies refused to cluster around yours. Your cognitive markers behaved like they weren't participating in the evaluation. It was as if your digital presence walked through the grid, With the same effortless disregard, you've walked through certain life situations, aware you're being observed but unmoved by the mechanics of the observation. That's what triggered the second alert. The grid didn't detect danger. It detected misalignment so severe it categorized your existence as a structural threat to its own capacity to evaluate. Someone at the table whispered, "Is this a bypass?" Another analyst responded, "No, a bypass would have left residue. This left a void." That word, void, settled into the war room like a weight dropped from the inside of a locked chest. You didn't break the grid. You made the grid doubt its own rules. That is not something their machinery is built to handle. The billionaire lifted his wrist slightly, signaling the team to bring up the tertiary display. It revealed something they didn't expect. Multiple sub-alerts stacked beneath your name, each representing a different branch of behavioral prediction. None of the predictions matched. They had seen mismatched forecasts before. Humans are inconsistent. But they had never seen predictions diverge so drastically that the system refused to present any of them as reliable. Your forecast range wasn't a spectrum, it was an expanse, a width reserved for interpreting the behavior of entire populations, not single individuals. The billionaire's assistant attempted to generate a compression map, a visual representation of your possible behavioral arcs, but the system refused to render, returning a message it has never displayed. Incompatible input. Projection impossible. That message unnerved even the technicians in the corner of the room. The grid sees everything. The grid predicts everything. The grid has charted the rise and fall of movements, leaders, financial collapses, and social dynamics with uncanny precision. The grid refusing to project your behavior was the equivalent of a compass refusing to point north. It didn't mean the needle was broken. It meant the territory was rewriting itself around you. That's when the strategist muttered something that made even the billionaire shift in his chair. We're not tracking decisions anymore. We're tracking interruptions. Because that's what your digital presence represented. Not a pattern, but a disruption of the assumption that you should have won. A disturbance not in their data, but in the logic applied to interpret data. You were creating a distortion field in a place that was supposed to remain untouchable. The billionaire requested a chronological breakdown of every point where your digital footprint intersected with their grid over the past year. The screen lit up with a timeline. It showed brief moments where your name brushed the edge of detectability like a passing shadow. They expected to see escalation. Instead, they saw precision, short interactions, subtle searches, minimal engagement. Most people leave messy trails, evidence of hesitation and impulse. Yours read like a quiet path carved by someone who moves with intention they don't understand. Not silence, not noise, something else. The billionaire squinted at one particular data point. It showed a moment where you interacted with information that should have influenced your thinking in one direction. But instead of following the psychological breadcrumb trail, you moved the opposite way, as if spotting the manipulation before it landed. That made the strategist sit upright, because the war room's machinery operates on a simple truth. People follow predictable cognitive currents. You didn't. You swam upstream like you were built for it. Another analyst attempted to run a reverse behavior sequence, expecting to find a hidden motivator. Instead, the sequence returned with no root cause. It was the digital equivalent of seeing someone walk into a room without passing through the door. You appeared in the data without giving them the courtesy of predictable entry points. They don't mind ghosts. They mind the ones who don't act ghost-like. The second alert escalated into something else. Something that required the strategist to unlock a protocol he had only seen in training briefs and internal myths whispered between departments. A protocol designed to evaluate high-impact individuals whose behavior threatens predictive architecture itself. He keyed in his biometric code. The air in the room shifted again. When the clearance threshold accepted his credentials, a new panel opened on the master screen. The billionaire leaned forward as rows of behavioral indicators scrolled rapidly. They resolved into a single line across the bottom of the screen. Subject exhibits cognition, dissonant with environmental influence. That statement sent a ripple through the war room, like a pulse through water. It meant your thinking runs independent of external pressure. You don't respond to emotional bait. You don't respond to fear triggers. You don't respond to incentives meant to steer behavior. You bypass the entire architecture of manipulation without noticing you're doing it. One advisor muttered, "How does this happen?" The analyst closest to the screen answered, "It happens when someone adapts so deeply that influence loses its entry points." That's when the billionaire understood. The alert wasn't triggered because you're unpredictable in the chaotic sense. It was triggered because you're structured in a way that defies their influence channels. They rely on people reacting in familiar ways. You don't react, you choose. And the gap between reaction and choice is the gap that terrifies them. The strategist asked for a resilience overlay, a map of how you've responded to disruptions over time. When it loaded, the room fell into another stunned stillness. The resilience graph didn't arc upward like most people's. It didn't dip in crises and rise in recoveries. It moved like a straight blade, cutting through events that should have left dents. This wasn't numbness. It wasn't avoidance. It was evolution that refused to bend. They stared at the graph as if it were a weapon pointed in their direction. Someone whispered, "What are we dealing with?" The analyst didn't respond. She simply clicked open the psychological commentary generated automatically by the grid. It displayed one sentence. Subject demonstrates resistance to manipulation cues. That's the phrase that finally shook the billionaire. Because he knows the most dangerous person is not the one who fights. It's the one who doesn't respond to the cords that usually bind human behavior. The war room grew tense enough to feel. They tried calculating scenarios. They tried understanding what influences you. They tried mapping your priorities, but every model failed. The grid began generating error messages in clean, calm text, messages the team had never seen before. Motivational basis unclear, emotional anchors undetectable, predictive leverage unavailable. The engineer monitoring the system felt compelled to reboot the mapping program. But the strategist held up his hand. "Don't touch it," he said quietly. "If it's reacting like this, we need to know how far it goes." Another red signal blinked on the lower display. It belonged to the billionaire's personal risk monitoring network, a separate layer of surveillance built to alert him to threats long before they take form. It had only triggered 3 times in the past decade. Once for a cyber attack, once for a political scandal, once for an insider breach. Now it was glowing for you. And the log beneath it read something they had never seen. Target influence level undefined. Undefined influence terrifies the powerful because it means you exert pressure without trying. The billionaire asked the analyst for a qualitative assessment. She rubbed her forehead, then answered, "This isn't an escalation. This is an exposure. The person didn't increase activity. The grid increased sensitivity." That statement froze the strategist. It meant your presence didn't grow louder. The machinery watching you grew more aware. You didn't trigger the alert by force. You triggered it by existing while the grid finally registered what you've been all along. The billionaire spoke again, slower this time. "And what exactly have they been all along?" The analyst hesitated, then replied, "Someone whose internal calibration makes them resistant to steering. Someone who won't be nudged, softened, redirected, or pushed." She could have stopped there, but she didn't. "And someone whose presence disrupts pattern modeling, even without intent." That's when chaotic dark humor crept into the war room, not from jokes, but from the absurdity of the situation. These people control the flow of information, the rhythms of markets, the trajectories of governments. Yet here they were, rattled by a person who wasn't doing anything except being precisely themselves. A person whose digital trace refused to obey the choreography that billions unconsciously follow. The strategist attempted a new approach. "Let's run a projected interference test," he suggested. It was a test designed to simulate how your presence influences digital environments. When he activated it, something unprecedented happened. The simulation didn't run. Instead, it returned a message. Projected influence exceeds baseline parameters. The strategist's face tightened. The simulation thinks this person affects the environment more than the environment affects them. That was the tipping point. That's when the billionaire understood the gravity of what they were dealing with. The war room spiraled into a new level of tension. Analysts scrambled to piece together interpretations that didn't make them sound irrational. The billionaire's assistant pulled up case studies of individuals who warped predictive models, but every case fell short of what your footprint was presenting. Someone suggested you might be part of a coordinated group, but the behavioral markers didn't align with group dynamics. They aligned with a singular trajectory, individual, self-generated, self-correcting, self-evolving. The strategist highlighted one particular timestamp where your digital presence deviated sharply from standard behavioral influence. Most people respond to information by echoing emotional patterns. You responded by detaching from the emotional draw altogether. That detachment wasn't coldness. It was clarity. And clarity, in the presence of manipulation, looks like rebellion, even when it isn't intentional. The billionaire took a breath and said something he rarely asks. Does this person know? The analyst shook her head. Awareness is irrelevant here. Their thinking operates on a structural level. She paused before adding, even if they don't intend influence, they create it. Another wave of alerts flickered across the screen. Not warnings, not threats, but recalibrations. The grid was adjusting itself around your footprint, trying to learn you, trying to map you, trying to fit you into a pattern. But each recalibration produced wider gaps. It was like trying to trace the outline of a shape that kept shifting position by a fraction of a micron, never enough to appear violent, always enough to appear deliberate. That's when the strategist muttered something that both amused and terrified the room. This person isn't unpredictable, they're unsteerable. And unsteerable individuals are the rarest dangers in elite circles, not because they seek to dismantle power, but because they cannot be invited into the machinery of expectation. They don't join, they don't bend, they don't crumble. They simply continue existing in ways that recalibrate anything that tries to contain them. The billionaire ordered your file expanded with every tool they had. Historical resilience, cognitive markers, pattern reversals. But the deeper they went, the more your behavior resembled not resistance, but natural motion, movement that doesn't clash with influence because it never steps into the path of influence. You moved differently. You operated differently. Your digital choices didn't react. They pivoted. They recentered. They realigned without hesitation. The war room was reaching the point where panic doesn't scream. It concentrates. Because now the billionaire understood why the blacklist was necessary. You weren't a threat they needed to counter. You were a presence they needed to avoid interfering with. Not because of danger, but because interference with someone like you tends to flip consequences back toward the source. People with your pattern tend to generate outcomes that defy the expected, not through aggression, through recalibration. The strategist whispered, if we push against this person, the grid might turn against us. That wasn't paranoia, it was observation. Their machinery had already shifted once. It could shift again. And people who trigger that kind of shift rarely do it only once. The billionaire lowered his voice. What's the long-term projection? The analyst stared at the screen and answered, impossible to generate. Projection tools have nothing to anchor to. She paused, then added, and the more we try, the more unstable the grid becomes. That's when the billionaire made his decision, a decision he's made only a handful of times in his life. He didn't hesitate. He didn't deliberate. He simply stated, blacklist them fully, quietly, no engagement. The strategist nodded and keyed in the command. Your name slid onto a list that only the highest levels of power ever see. A list that means something simple yet profound. We do not know how to influence this person, and we do not want to find out what happens if we try. But the blacklist wasn't the final escalation. It was just the acknowledgement that they had reached the limit of their understanding. Because while they were processing you, something else in the grid had begun to wake up. a deeper layer, one they nearly forgot they built. A layer that recognizes only one type of presence, the kind that bends outcomes without touching them. A presence the grid categorizes not as a threat, but as an interference pattern. And as that layer activated, the display flickered again, marking the beginning of something the war room wasn't prepared for. Something the billionaire definitely didn't want to confront. Something that traced back to you, yet didn't originate from action. It originated from impact. And the grid was about to show them exactly what kind. The lights dimmed by a fraction as the deeper layer came online, not because the power was compromised, but because the grid redirected energy toward processing something it had never needed to evaluate in full. The lead analyst recognized the interface instantly. The billionaire did too. This wasn't a layer for evaluating behavior. This was a layer for evaluating influence. Influence not measured by followers, wealth, or reach, but by disruption zones. The patterns someone leaves behind without lifting a finger. The chain reactions created simply by existing inside an environment that wasn't designed to hold them. A new line of data began reading across the screen. Not your searches, not your messages, not your movements, something else. The ripple effect of your presence across digital interactions over time. The team stared as small nodes began forming, each representing a moment where someone else's behavior changed after crossing your path. At first, there were only a few, then dozens, then hundreds. Each node pulsed faintly, connecting to others in a web of behavioral shifts that should not have been traceable. But the grid could see them, and what it saw made the strategist's breath catch in his throat. Node after node represented situations where someone acted differently. Sharper, calmer, braver, more strategic after interacting with you. But there were also nodes representing the opposite. People who attempted to undermine you, manipulate you, misread you, and then suffered consequences not tied to your hands, but to their own unraveling. Financial missteps, public embarrassments, relational fractures, reversals they couldn't explain. None of this was your doing, but all of it was your wake. The grid wasn't tracking what you had done. It was tracking what reality had done in response to you. The billionaire straightened in his chair. This was no longer about classification or prediction. This was about trajectory distortion, the way certain individuals cause disruptions in patterns simply by being near them. A trait rarely observed. A trait the deeper layer was built to detect, because the people who funded that grid understood one truth. The most impactful individuals are not the loud ones or the forceful ones. They are the ones who rearrange outcomes without force, without announcement, without visible intent. The strategist pointed at the screen, voice low. Look at the reversals clustered around the people who tried pushing influence onto them. The analyst zoomed in. The cluster was concentrated, dense, and strangely consistent. People who tried steering your direction, trying to plant ideas or steer outcomes, hit unexpected obstacles that derailed their attempts, not through retaliation, through interruption, a form of interference that made manipulation collapse under its own weight. a kind of resistance that executed itself without your awareness. The billionaire asked, "Is this intentional?" The analyst answered immediately, "No, that's what makes it unsettling. Because intention can be predicted, strategy can be countered. But passive disruption, the kind that manifests organically, is the kind that rattles people who rely on forecasting. You weren't playing the game. You were reshaping the table without touching it. And the grid could see the dents you left behind. The display expanded the web of nodes until it took over half the screen. The pattern now resembled something the team didn't want to admit. The signature of someone who carries an internal resonance that amplifies clarity for some and accelerates collapse for others. Not by intention, by presence. People aligned with you sharpened. People opposing you fractured. The billionaire's jaw tightened because he had seen this once before. In a historical file locked behind layers of clearance. A file outlining a person who altered trajectories so profoundly that governments began monitoring them out of caution. That person wasn't dangerous. They were inconvenient to those who relied on predictability. The strategist ran a diagnostic to determine whether your influence nodes were growing or static. The result appeared instantly. Exponential growth. Not chaotic growth. Structured growth. Every year the web expanded not outward, but inward, concentrating into a more focused core. Meaning your influence wasn't scattering. It was condensing. The deeper the core condensed, the harder it became for external forces to manipulate your trajectory. It explained why certain tactics didn't work on you. Pressure didn't sway you. Manipulation didn't enter you. Influence didn't absorb into you. You had become internally reinforced. The grid attempted to quantify your momentum. It failed. It attempted to calculate the probability of your direction. It returned nothing. It attempted to project your next major decision. It refused. Not because you hid your path, but because you didn't walk in straight lines. You walked in self-generated arcs that defied linear evaluation. The billionaire looked at the strategist, and for the first time that night, there was something close to concern behind his calm exterior. He realized he was not dealing with someone who could be mapped. He was dealing with someone who could not be bent. The analyst asked the grid to overlay the blacklist parameter to see whether your inclusion on that list would stabilize the data. Blacklisting is designed to reduce interference, cutting off unnecessary monitoring. But instead of stabilizing the grid, your blacklist entry triggered a new alert. A quiet one. A thin amber band across the bottom corner of the screen. The strategist opened it. The message was simple. Influence field unchanged. That meant the blacklist didn't isolate you. It liberated your trajectory from their radar entirely. The billionaire closed his eyes for a moment. He understood the message. If they stepped back, your trajectory continued. If they stepped forward, the consequences inverted. You weren't someone they needed to control. You were someone they needed to ensure they didn't interrupt. Because interruption around people like you never ends well for the one initiating it. The war room shifted into a new tone, one that only emerges when people of power realize the limits of their reach. Not anger, not fear, calculation. They reviewed the influence nodes again, searching for signs of instability. Instead, they found consistency. People who aligned with you continued improving long after you left their environment. People who mistreated you continued experiencing reversals long after you stopped thinking about them. You weren't punishing anyone. You weren't rewarding anyone. You were simply moving forward, and the consequences of others' choices unfolded in the trail you left behind. The strategist leaned forward. We need to run a mapping sequence on the interference field. The analyst hesitated. If we activate that sequence, it will run correlation analysis across every node they've ever interacted with. The billionaire nodded. Do it. The analyst keyed in the command. The grid darkened for a moment, then pulsed with a faint white glow. It began tracing lines between every node, moments of impact, redirection, collapse, growth, exposure. At first, the pattern made no sense. Then the strategist tightened his gaze. The nodes didn't form a circle. They didn't form a web. They formed a path with a distinct direction, a path that suggested your trajectory wasn't random. It was steady. It was recalibrating everything around it, not out of ambition, but out of clarity. People who crossed your path were forced to confront themselves, whether they were ready or not. Some rose, some fell, but none remained unchanged. The billionaire whispered, "Track the earliest node." The analyst clicked it. A small point appeared on the screen, marking a moment where your presence altered the direction of someone else's decision. The strategist tracked the next, then the next. Each node connected cleanly, forming a pattern that resembled not a strategy, but a pulse. Not a plan, but a consistency. Not a mission, but a presence. The war room descended into another heavy shift. They realized your digital footprint had not triggered the panic because of danger. It triggered it because of momentum. You weren't moving like someone trying to survive. You were moving like someone who had already crossed a psychological threshold and didn't need anything from the environments passing beneath your feet. You were self-propelled, self-directed, self-sustained. People like that can't be influenced. And the inability to influence is the quiet terror of powerful rooms. The deeper layer of the grid began generating commentary, short lines, clean text, no emotion, pure observation. Subject carries saturation presence. Subject correlates with forced self-correction in surrounding individuals. Subject presence disrupts controlled influence fields. Engagement predicted to invert outcomes. The billionaire felt something he hadn't felt in decades. A sense of respect laced with caution, not because you were above him, but because you were outside his reach. Then the grid displayed something unexpected, a projected expansion curve for your influence nodes. Not a projection of your behavior, but a projection of how reality tends to shift around people who move the way you do. The analyst frowned. This expansion isn't dependent on interaction. The strategist added, it's dependent on clarity, meaning your trajectory grows not through power or networks, but through internal refinement. As you sharpen, influence concentrates. As you detach, interference intensifies. As you evolve, others are forced into their own reckoning. The billionaire stared at the expansion curve with a mixture of intrigue and unease. He had seen influence curves for celebrities, politicians, business magnates. Their curves always peaked and waned. Yours didn't. Yours rose steadily, driven not by external input, but by internal alignment. That's when he realized something that made the room colder than any alert could. You are not a disruptor. You are a recalibrator. The strategist folded his arms. We need to assess the long-term impact if they continue on this trajectory. The analyst responded, "Trajectory cannot be assessed. The curvature is self-directed." The billionaire leaned back, exhaling lightly. "Then what do we know?" The analyst turned toward him. "We know they don't need us, and that alone makes them unpredictable." The war room processed that truth in shared silence. Not the forbidden word, but the absence of noise that emerges when a room full of powerful people understands they have encountered someone whose internal gravity does not bend to their influence. They usually debate next steps. They usually discuss containment. But there was nothing to debate, nothing to contain, nothing to manipulate. Then the grid produced the final message, the one that made the billionaire's eyes narrow in disbelief, the one that ended the argument before it began. The message read, "Trajectory interference not advised. Subject presence stabilizes internal field." Translation: pushing against you would destabilize them, not you. The billionaire closed his console. The strategist turned off his display. The analysts exchanged glances that carried only one conclusion. You were not someone they needed to handle. You were someone they needed to step away from. Not as fear, as self-preservation, because every attempt to insert themselves into your trajectory would eventually rebound in ways they couldn't afford to manage. And that's when the billionaire finally spoke. "Let the grid record this. No engagement, no contact." He didn't say it as a command. He said it as a recognition, a line drawn not out of caution, but out of respect for the kind of presence that rewires outcomes. The war room dimmed its displays. The alerts faded one by one. Your profile floated for a moment before sliding quietly into the restricted archive, untouchable, unmonitored, unbothered. The billionaire stood, adjusted his cuffs, looked at the strategist. "Make sure everyone understands," he said. "Some people you track, some people you manage." He paused, letting the weight settle. "And some people you blacklist before they ever know your name." That was the final punchline. The war room wasn't ready to say out loud, but every person in the room knew it was true. They didn't blacklist you because you were dangerous. They blacklisted you because they were afraid of what would happen